My name's Bekah Rusnock, and I was an editorial assistant for the Bethlehem Press newspaper when the casino debates were starting. And that was my first job as a journalist. I was fresh out of college and was kind of thrown into a very large story that I covered with a lot of passion, I think, because it was so exciting to be at that stage in my life with this brand new development that was going on. And then my last day, the day that I told my boss that this was my 2 weeks notice, was the day that the casino opened. So my first story was the casino. My first day on the job was to cover the city council meeting where they debated gaming and gambling and should it be allowed in the IR district. And then my last day on the job was the grand opening at a casino. I went to that. It was a cool event with the Blue Man Group and like fireworks and all kinds of crazy stuff going on. And then I walked back to the office, which is on 3rd Street, just a couple blocks from where the casino is. And I told my boss that I was putting my 2 weeks notice, that I kind of wanted to see that story from beginning to end, and that I felt that I did that, and it was just time to move on. And then I went and worked for the city of Bethlehem in economic development for the next 4 years. I can, yeah. So the debates over gambling and gaming were full of characters, I think is probably the best way to describe it. Pretty much everyone in Bethlehem had an opinion about gaming or gambling. And there are pretty much two large groups. One, pro-gaming. Gaming is going to be the economic engine that helps us revitalize the Bethlehem Steel site. And anti-gambling, gambling being I would say it ranged from a sin to just something we don't want in our town. A lot of the negatives of gambling people thought were a poor balance to the Christmas City vibe of the city. So the debates were lively and often. More casual debates were like a little bit more fun to listen to because people would bring up very like personal things like my great grandfather worked at that steel plant and he'd be rolling over in his grave if he knew what they were going to do to it. At the same time, people would say, my great-grandfather worked at that steel site and he knows that we need jobs. So it was a good show. It was very entertaining and it was very impassioned. I kind of picked the best seat in the house, for lack of a better term. When I walked into that meeting as a very new reporter, I didn't really know the rules of where you sit, and you have to identify yourself as the press. So I kind of found my way down to the front of the auditorium, and there was a press table, and I felt like I should sit not at it but near it. So I sat about 2 rows back because the first row you couldn't sit there because of where the chairs were. So I sat right behind that row, and just so happened to sit next to an older woman who told me that she was a Moravian, and an older gentleman that told me that he was a former steelworker. And the Moravian woman happened to be in the anti-gambling camp, and the steelworker was in the pro-gaming camp. And so throughout the meeting, they would, the public was just making comments. So it would be, someone would stand up and say, I'm against gambling. And the steelworker guy would kind of like grab my shirt and say, that's so-and-so, I went to Liberty with him, and this is why he's saying that. This is the background. So I was like, okay, I'm trying to get like all sides of the story here, and I literally was sitting between the pro and the cons. And they weren't press prepped people. They were just regular residents. So they were just giving me their honest opinion about what was happening and about what people were saying, and to try to fill in more like the small town gossip kind of color to the story. Certainly, the presence of Sands was very clear in Bethlehem leading up to the decision on the gaming license. They moved basically a small team here that's kind of like, I would consider them to be like their outreach team. Marketing professionals, public relations professionals, people that are good at communicating, people that really understand the Sands message and their duty is to kind of deploy it in a community. A lot of those people were about the same age as I was, so I got to know some of them very well just because we kind of were in the same social circle of being like young professionals in a small town. There's not that many different places you can go. There's like so many coffee shops and so many like sports bars and so many like nice places to go out to dinner. But everyone that I talked to, the Sands people were very much on message. You weren't getting their personal opinion about the matter because it's not really their personal opinion. They work for a corporation, so I got the sense that they were very committed to what they were saying. The message that I was hearing in a public meeting from, the president of the Sands was the same message that I was hearing from like my friend who happened to work in public relations. They were very present in public arenas too. You'd see them at, DBA events and like Chamber of Commerce mixers and things like that. They certainly put the effort out, just as a lot of companies put the effort out. I mean, if you ever go to a Greater Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce mixer, a good portion of the room is just a new business that started or, a new business that expanded into the area. And they're going to send their same people, their marketing people, their communications people, their public relations people are going to come out to meet the community. I mean, that's their whole job. So it was very well organized because Sands is a very well-run company. But it wasn't odd in that I've seen other people do the same thing. I mean, it's a good kind of first step for if you're a marketing professional to get out and meet other people in your community. So. I remember I was at the Sands had a public meeting for people that wanted to be vendors. So they have incentives if you're if you're a female-owned business, just like the state also has these incentives. If you're a female-owned business, you're a minority-owned business, and they kind of have a process. Here's who we pick for vendors, not just females and minorities, but here's who we look for vendors. These are this is the paperwork. This is what it's going to look like. Here's how we work with you. And I sat next to a woman who had an embroidery business. And I said, what would you do, like an embroidery business? I don't, how would this casino benefit you? And she said, well, look, they're going to have uniforms. The people that park your car have one uniform. The people that cook your food have one uniform. The people that deal the cards have one uniform. The janitor has one uniform. Housekeeping has a different uniform. And she said they most frequently will stitch a name, like the person's name on the uniform. And that's what I do. I'm embroidery. And she said, it's important that, if they're going to put out a contract where they need 100 new uniforms, like that's big business for me. That's like life-changing business. I don't do that much size in one sitting. I do maybe 30, 10, 6, but 100 is a huge order. So she's like, I want to know right from the beginning that, listen, I want to work with them. I need to know their process. That's why I'm here. So it was interesting to hear how smaller businesses were thinking about how this large business was going to affect them. And I never really had thought about embroidery ever in my entire life until I met her. But she had a very interesting story. The Sands always put on a show, a full show. You always got that 100%. They have really put a lot of thought into how this is going to go and who should be there at all those steps. So the groundbreaking, the last steel beam going in, preview night, everything. So the grand opening was the first time really that the public had been in the building, and everything smelled like brand new, like sort of like when you build a house and it smells like paint, and like you can like it just feels everything's like crisp and clean and shiny. And I mean, it had been polished like to the nines. So they had Sheldon Adelson, who's the head of Las Vegas Sands. He's like really one of the richest people in the world. He came with his wife, and they had all these like dignitaries speak, and they would always have the group there's a Save Our Steel group, and it's like former steel workers that are interested in preserving the history of the site. The Sands had kind of teamed with them, and there would always be kind of like a row of older gentlemen that could tell you like good stories about the steel site and like good memories like that. So they were there. The Blue Man group, which was they're like a performance art group, they were there. I think there was a band of some sort. And they also typically at a grand opening for like a business, you cut a ribbon. Usually they get a big red ribbon and they hold it and they get big like goofy oversized scissors and they cut it. But they actually cut a steel beam at the opening of the Sands. So they had like a steel beam, and one of the steel workers who worked on the project, who like put the steel up for the actual structure, he cut it with a welding torch. It was very entertaining. It was really, but it was that's what that event should have been. There was just a lot of enthusiasm. Speeches from like a lot of dignitaries, a couple people from like the state. Trying to remember. I don't think the governor was there, but I don't remember. But it was a show. It was like a performance. Yeah, Bethlehem Steel's history is particularly unique because most industrial sites don't abut a town the way this one does. When you look at Bethlehem from 30,000 like feet straight up in the air, if you're looking at like you're a bird like looking down, you can kind of draw the outline of the city, and right through the middle is a river. So right next to the river is where Bethlehem Steel is. It's a heart. People say it's a heart emotionally, that it's like that's how people feel about it. But it's also physically, that'd be located where your heart would be if the city was a person. At one point, roughly 50% of the population in the city worked for that company. And in jobs like steel worker, accountant, secretary, janitor, every level of job was working there. I think those industrial towns are very popular in Pennsylvania, Palmerton's that way. There's a lot of places that were grown around a plant. But here, the name Bethlehem, the community's name, is actually in the name of the company. I think that's really important to people there. There's a huge sense of pride there. When you go to New York and they're tearing down a building, if that beams come from Bethlehem, it says the word Bethlehem on the beam. They stamped the beams with the name of the company, which just so happened to be the name of the town. Because everyone worked there, it was kind of like neutral ground. So even though we're immigrants and we're here because we're here for jobs, I'm Italian and you're Irish. Normally, in a lot of circumstances, we might not get along, but we both have to make sure this scalding hot beam doesn't shear our fingers off. So we need to work as a team. That attitude ended up at Liberty High School. That attitude ended up on 4th Street. That attitude ended up on Market Street. Like everywhere in the community, people just realized we have to work together. And if we can work together, then we should work together. Yeah, so I would say that the casino is definitely part of the identity of the city if you are from outside of Bethlehem and coming here. I don't know that people that live in Bethlehem really still first thought being Sands Casino. One of the plans that Las Vegas Sands had kind of pushed forth was that the site was going to be integrated into the grid of the South Side, but also hidden at the same time. The actual casino building, where the actual, like not the mall, not the hotel, but the actual, this is where you can play blackjack, this is where you can play slots, is built in an ore pit. So that's where the raw material that was coming to Bethlehem Steel that was used, they built that part in the pit, which just geographically sits a little bit lower than that like 3rd Street corridor. And I think even though they have that enormous sand sign in front of the ore bridge, people just kind of breeze right by there and don't pay attention to it. I think Sands was a little strategic in not wanting to like glom on to the Christmas City identity, respectful of the fact that its core of that identity is Main Street. When you go into the Sands around Christmas time, if you go in there in the mall, they do a really nice Christmas tree. The decorations are really nice. It's very pretty. It's festive. But I don't think that it's not like they temporarily changed their name to like Sands Christmas Bethlehem or anything. I think they're kind of respectful of that, and more so the way Bethlehem Steel functioned, where it was like, we're a member of this community, and if this is the campaign that we've all agreed on, then we'll participate, but we don't need to be the star of that campaign. I think it's important to remember the fence. So there used to be a fence totally around the whole site. Even though you could see that there was a road, your car couldn't get through because there was a fence with a gate. I actually used to sometimes go down next to the fence to like write stories if I didn't feel like being in the office anymore, because you could sit out there and it was like open, and it was just kind of like nice just to get some air. But there was a fence around the whole site, so you couldn't just walk down there with like your car and put your car in front of the blast furnaces and take pictures of your car like people do now. You couldn't get like your wedding photos taken there. You couldn't get like your engagement photos if your friends pop out of a bush or something like that. Like that didn't exist. So even though people in Bethlehem had this very strong association and attachment to the Bethlehem Steel property, they physically couldn't touch it because of the fence. When the casino opened, that network of roads became really important because, the casino just wants more routes to get to the casino and to get to parking. So they had to open up those fences. They had to like break down those walls, get people to drive to the site. And at the same time as ArtsQuest is being developed and the kind of Steel Stacks complex is opening and PBS is opening down there, like that road network services those properties as well. So as soon as those fences went down, it was almost like people like woke up one day and thought, wow, I could go take a photo down there. I could go stand there and just look up at it, just like you could have if you worked at Bethlehem Steel. I think it's important to remember that there was always a fence there because it's not like we could just wander down to the steel plant and hang out. Like it was security gates and you need to have an ID and a tag to get down there. It was a secure site. You don't want kids like playing near molten steel. That's not a real good combination. So even if like your grandfather worked there, you personally may have never visited that site. You maybe went for like one treat one time when it was like employee day, or like maybe like on your grandfather's like retirement day or something, they allowed you to come in for like a small party in an office. But it's not like you were ever allowed to go down there and just kind of play. So as soon as those barriers were removed, and again, the only reason they were removed was because the road network was needed to get people to the sands, people started to see that site as more of a community gathering space, the way like a park would be, like that you would kind of go there and eat your lunch, or just go there and like play with your kids, or go fishing, or like walk your dog. So that really changed for people as soon as those barriers were taken down. I see it everywhere now. It's just like this backdrop that everyone has access to, like for prom and engagements, weddings, like just people just want to be near it and they want it to be part of their memories. That first conversation I had with the kind of pro-gaming, anti-casino group, anti-gambling people that I sat next to, the gentleman that was the former steelworker, what he told me about why he wanted the casino to come to town was that people need jobs. And I think we forget sometimes because politically you talk so much about job creation and people say jobs, 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 and like you don't actually stop and think about like what your job means to you, what it means to have a job, to get up every morning and to go to work and to help other people accomplish a task. What that means for your psyche and psychologically, like for your emotional health, what all of that means. So I think the first thing that happened is that the Sands hired a lot of people. So a lot of people that, and I'm not talking about like they were, 10 years ago they were a steel worker and now they're a blackjack dealer. It was that they hired a lot of people, that jobs were present and that people were getting them. So like your group of friends, like maybe 3 or 4 people interviewed, 2 people got a job. Like it's a big deal when your friends start to get jobs. That's like a huge life step. And you're proud of them because you know that they want a job and it's good for them. So that bringing of jobs, the actual individual job, was really important. I don't know that people kind of march around with like a ton of pride over the jobs so much because I don't tend to know a lot of people that work there right now. The people that I knew that got jobs there were like working, it was like first job out of college or like high school, upper high school, like 17, 18. I'm saving up to buy a car, I need a job. You can work at a restaurant, you can work in like a store, and like that's pretty much what you're qualified to do. You can do like manual labor, you can work at like a landscaping business or like haul concrete or something, but like at 17, you're not like super qualified to accomplish a lot of things. So those first jobs for people were the people that I knew that were getting work, were working at like the mall, at the Sands Mall. That job didn't exist for that person a year before they got that job. So that kind of initial push was really great, that there was like all these jobs. People had a lot of self-pride in the fact that they had a job. I don't know so much that people were like bragging, like I got a job at the Sands, so much as it was, I got a job. The other big impact that the Sands had was this kind of elevation of a standard. The woman that I met that was had the embroidery business talked about this to me. She said, we're gonna have top restaurants in this community. We're gonna have bartenders that know how to shake up and mix a drink, not just like pour you a beer off the tap. That standard is going to be elevated because this is one of the top entertainment corporations on the planet, and they have a standard, and all of us are going to kind of have to rise to it. Now, not everyone's going to be that bartender or like work in that kitchen, but if you have a restaurant that's near the casino, like you're going to want some of those dollars. Some of those people are going to eat dinner not at the casino. They're going to go to another restaurant or they're going to stay at a different hotel. So everyone's game had to kind of step up. And I think that had a huge impact on the community too. And I think there is a feeling that the casino came here and it didn't destroy us. And there's a lot of pride behind that because it's kind of like this, Bethlehem's tough enough to not only come back from the loss of its main industry, but also to assimilate around another huge industry without becoming Las Vegas or without becoming Atlantic City. I believe there's a lot of pride around that. there's a lot more fun things to do here than there were in 2005. So the entertainment options have really grown. The options of where to live have grown. There's a lot more apartment complexes, and there's a lot more variety of size and amenities around. Things were picking up in 2005 when I got here. You could tell that there was some momentum, but it was still pretty sparse. There was, 3 bars to pick from, or like 2 coffee shops to hang out in. Now there's, 20 bars and 10 coffee shops. The attitude of everyone here has just grown. You find more people that move back here after college. I was kind of part of the first generation that was like, I'm not going to move to Philly or New York or Chicago or Boston or DC. I'm going to kind of stay around the Lehigh Valley and work at this job and see what happens from here. Now you have people that are like deliberately moving back to the area to start families and to like raise families. That's really good. So I would say that the momentum kind of paid off. Those like early seeds have grown, and I think it's really good. It's good to see that. It should be that in a community. You want a community to grow because it only does one of two things: either community grows or community dies, and you don't want the alternative. So the fact that there has been growth is a good thing.